Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Red River Institute of History, welcome to our very special night in which we all get to share the birth of a chronicle like no other, of our history as a state like no other. Our author has written an eloquent speech for me, and because he does so beautifully, I am not going to mess it up. So, as Oklahomans Two ardently contends, it is a state with a singular tale that includes the exiled or immigrant stories of numerous peoples who come from other places across America, across the world, and now we share the common distinction of being Oklahomans. It is a large state with a modest number of people, sweeping vistas and ranges, and a distinctive sense of place, ironically perhaps best appreciated by those who have left for some time and then returned. As it has been written, it is a land that has known sorrows. It is a land that has broken the ashen crust and moistened it with tears. A land scarred and riven by the plowshare of war and tragedy and billowed with graves of her dead, but a land of legend, a land of song, a land of hallowed and heroic memories. And so we celebrate the completion of a work many years in the making that gives you 600 pages that one scholar calls epic and hypnotically readable, that gives you 800 images, including from the palettes and lenses of Oklahoma's greatest illustrators, that gives you the pioneering feature of over 200, are you ready for this? QR codes. Yes, I said QR codes, that with the wave of your electronic device takes you to expanded versions of stories and narrative passages from throughout the book on the johnjdwyer.com website that total approximately the size of half of the entire book worth of additional material, all for free. So I hope you have all purchased your book tonight and had it signed. You're going to take home those 600 pages, but then on his website, there are twice as many more for you to enjoy and discover. Tonight, I celebrate with you as I am blessed to share regularly one small part of John J. Dwyer's genius. And I have to confess, we do a radio program together called Oklahoma Gold. And it is so compelling and so moving as he tells the stories of Oklahoma history that I cry every week. It takes every bit of composure while I am on the air to take a deep breath and go, now that's Oklahoma Gold. He makes storytelling and Oklahoma history alive. Together we created this Oklahoma history broadcast audio series called Oklahoma Gold. And you can hear Oklahoma Gold radio program that I co-host with John Sunday evenings at 7:05 on News Radio 1000 KTOK right here in Oklahoma City. And Friday mornings at 8:45 in Enid on KGWA 960 AM and 100.9 FM. And then, if you'd like to hear it again, you can go to johnjdwyer.com and relive each of the compelling chapters. They range from talking about the most incredible women, the most incredible Native Americans, the most incredible stories in our history, and he never fails to really capture the spirit of Oklahoma history. You can also receive these free in your inbox, along with the sort of stories that John wrote for both Oklahomans volumes, simply by subscribing for free to johnjdwyer.com. Like the subtitles of the book indicate, John tells stories about Oklahoma people. He dignifies our history through the stories he shares. That's Oklahoma gold. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from some of the people who have made the history of Oklahomans Two as well as the writing of it. Our first speaker this evening is one of the most accomplished of all Oklahoma political leaders. Former two-term governor Frank Keating grew up in Tulsa, married for half a century this year to Tulsa native Catherine Heller. And I believe my Theta pledge trainer, but we'll move on. His 30-year career in law enforcement and public service included duty as an FBI agent, a U.S. attorney, and Oklahoma legislator, including Republican Senate leader. He remains the only Oklahoma governor to have served in both houses of the legislature. He was also the highest-ranked Oklahoman in both the Reagan and first Bush presidential administrations. A multitude of deeds contributed to Governor Keating's status as one of the great governors in Oklahoma history, perhaps none more than the days following the Oklahoma City bombing, whose anniversary we just observed, when he personified leadership, living, loving, hoping, praying, and weeping with the people in their time of sorrows. He also wrote the foreword to the Oklahomans One and figures prominently across 5 decades of Oklahoma history in the Oklahomans Two. Please welcome former Governor Frank Keating. John wrote it all.
Oh, no. Well, on that note, I'll just sit down and have another glass of iced tea. And I apologize. I told John, who's a dear friend and a wonderful talent, that I was going to have to dart. My wife and I have an event at the Cowboy Hall this evening, and I didn't know anything about it. So thank goodness that I know about it now, otherwise we would end at 50 years. She would run me off. But you know what is really delightful is I was one of these kids, like many of us. My mother and dad, my mother came from Illinois, my dad came from Pennsylvania. We lived in Tulsa. I went to a school that did not require Oklahoma history. A law requires, as you know, public education to teach the history of our state. But the school I went to didn't require Oklahoma history. And when I came down here as a 28-year-old young member of the Oklahoma House of Representatives, in those days, if you were a Republican, they searched out after you on Saturday nights with their headlights because we had 25 of 101 members, Republican, high watermark, and then we had, when I was in the state Senate, 7 of 48 high watermark for Republicans. So we had a tough time during that time. But I thought, look at this Capitol building. It's gloomy. I mischievously said it reminds me of a Bulgarian veterans hospital. I got in trouble for saying that. But there was no art, very little. It was WPA art from the 30s. And there was no dome on the top, and no one wanted to build a dome. No one to put art in. Nope, that was crazy. And when I left office as governor, with private money, we put the dome on the Capitol. We put this history center here. The Smithsonian came within an inch of loaning us to Winnie Mae, and I haven't given up yet. The real Winnie Mae, right, Doctor? This is a wonderful substitute, but at any rate, representing flight, it's a wonderful thing that we have in Oklahoma, and the story of Wiley Post. We have so many stories. So I read Goebel's book, and I went through Denny Goebel's book, and I underlined, I said, wow, I never heard that. Read more, oh my word, I never heard that. And so I would bring it up with my friends. Are you all aware of X, Y, or Z about the history of Oklahoma, that we're the only state, settled by land runs, a number of 7 total. And then I thought, boy, wouldn't it be great to have an historian after the fact, but present, who would fill a book with art and color, maps and paintings, and just wonder and splendor. And that author is John Dwyer. And you must get Volume 1 because it moves into statehood, and it's filled with facts and factoids that I simply didn't know anything about. And I just think this state, and we take trips all the time to visit landmarks, to visit old forts and the like, because we have so much to offer. This book is, again, filled with paintings and art and maps and stories of courageous men and women who created this wonderful place, Choctaw for red people, where men and women of goodwill, both sides, both parties, race, color, sex, nationality, does not matter. Matter of fact, as a result of this unfortunate litigation that we are facing in the McGirt decision, a guy said to me the other day, he said, well, you know, reservation's not such a bad deal. And I said, you know something? In Oklahoma, and I don't have the statistics, the black, white, red, and yellow, the population of Oklahoma, the native population and the majority white population virtually have the same per capita personal income and education levels. Now that's something that we should celebrate, that anyone can begin anywhere and make it to the top. It's like Rogers and Hammerstein. I don't say I'm better than anybody else, but I'll be darned if I'm not just as good. We're a classless society. Doesn't matter who your mother or father were, you can make it here. And there are a lot of people and a lot of places that do not believe that and do not wave the flag for that. So I am thrilled, and John said he gave me a book, and here it is. And I'm going to run out of here tonight with my, is that not mine? Oh, excuse me, then. Hey, and Wanda Jackson is...
He's about to steal Wanda Jackson's book.
Yeah, no. I've been accused of... No, and Wanda Jackson is the heroine of the evening, so I'll be out of your hair. But I want to thank everybody for coming, and please buy a book, because on your mantle or on your side table, whatever it may be, you will celebrate a genius story of wonderful men and women from 1907 and before all the way to today. So thank you all so very much.
I'm Gwin Faulconer-Lippert, and you don't mess with Wanda Jackson's book. Our next speaker you will recognize because he has a cowboy hat, and he would like to recognize a very special person. On Wanda's book, there are many quotes from famous people and included in this, and John Dwyer is so appreciative that this special guest is here tonight. So John, I'm going to let you come up and introduce our next.
Thank you. I'm just up here for a moment to bring attention to a far greater historian than myself. In fact, a man that if there's wisdom and there's a lack of mistakes and so forth in this book, it's largely because of this gentleman right here. But I'm going to have another historian that helped us, the head of the Randall University History Department and more. My lifelong friend from Duncan, Oklahoma, Steve Byas, has known Dr. Castor a lot longer than I have. So I think Steve is better equipped than I am to tell you about the greatness of this man in his 94th year now, Dr. Castor? Next week, 94th year. And he has come here tonight. He has fought and scrapped and made it here tonight because he loves Oklahoma. He loves the people of Oklahoma. He loves our history, believes in its past, its present, its future. So, Steve, I'll let you do the honors for Dr. Castor here. Yeah, come on up here.
Dr. Castor would like for you to take this microphone to him once you have spoken.
Okay, very good. Well, the first time I ever heard of Dr. James Castor, I was in college. We called it Central State University then. Today it's called UCO. But I was living in the dorm there at Central State, and I remember my roommate had this 7:30 class, and I was just getting ready to go out to my class, and he comes in and he goes, "Oh my goodness." He said, "I can't believe the amount of work that professor is going to give us in this introduction to law class." And I said, "What's his name?" And he says, "Castor." And so I tried to avoid Castor, but I couldn't avoid him, and I did finally meet him. And even though I was a history major, even though I never had him for a class, I did get to talk to him quite often, and he was a great mentor when I was in the college. And of course, as the years went by, I've seen him at various history groups, Civil War groups, heritage groups, and that sort of thing. And I'm with the Stan Wadey Military Society, and we have an annual General's Birthday Party. And Dr. Castor was our speaker for 75 years, something like that. It was 40 years. It was a long time. And we told him that he had to keep doing it until he got it right. Well, he finally did. And so since that time, we've had different people each year. John's done it once, and I've done it once, and Jeff Massey back here's done it once. But the thing is, it only was one guy that needed to do it for all those years, and so now we're having to get some people try to measure up. But I know that he was well respected at Central in the political science department, but he's also a walking encyclopedia of American history as well. And so I can assure you that what John was saying about the editing of the book, that Dr. Castor read it, and after John told me some of the fine-tooth comb that he was using, I thought back to my roommate and some of the things that he was demanding, and he made it a great book, an even greater book.
Dr. Castor would like to say a few words.
Ladies and gentlemen, and for the evening, Oklahomans all. It took a lot of people to get me here tonight. I've been a resident in Quail Creek Senior Living for some time, and I'd like to have the manager of that very fine enterprise come and introduce the people that have given me care for over 3 years. Jill Townsend. Will you come up, Jill? She's good looking too, see?
I'm Jill Townsend, Executive Director at Quail Creek, and I've had the privilege of being at Quail Creek with Dr. Castor for 3 years now. And some of our team are here, and I want to introduce them. We brought quite the fan club tonight. We've been really looking forward to this. So we have Ray, concierge. We have Karen, our life enrichment director. We have Paula with traditions. We have Benice, concierge, and we have Rebecca, another life enrichment director at Quail Creek, who's enjoying.
I want to make the statement that John Leonard of Edmond has been my personal minder here tonight and will help. It's great to see several old and trusted friends of former anxious days. Some of their names have already been called, and I'm honored that they're here. I'm happy that they're not speaking, because if they told what they know, I'd have to shoot them before they started. I'm here to at the end of a long and enjoyable life. Tonight I am 93 and 11 months old. If I make it to the 29th of April, I'll be 24. Proof positive that the good die young. I'm honored in two ways to be here tonight for this splendid book. In the first place, it is a real honor to be associated with the author, John Dwyer, who is a good and talented man. He's a very careful historian. He takes in the viewpoints of many people. It was my honor to be with him on the first volume, and I was honored even more to be with him on the second volume. He takes very careful attention to his history writing. I was able to make a suggestion here and there, and make a correction here and there. I made some suggestions. Some of them were taken, some of them were not. But he is really an author of distinction. He's got many points in heaven already for his activities. Now, the second honor that I want to acknowledge is the fact that I was able to participate in the writing of 2 volumes on American history, to be taken into consideration of all of their groups, all of their attitudes, the shotgun wedding of several groups to make Oklahoma a state, and then the long story of their achievements: oil prospectors, oil producers, aviation leaders, comic leaders, cultural leaders, and all of the things that have gone on since this great state was given status in the Union. The 45th star. Hey, Oklahoma. I hope the Lord will bless you and keep you until we meet again. Thank you.
John, is it time to give out awards or speakers? Do Wanda. Okay. Dr. Castor, thank you so much for those beautiful words. I know it was very special to have you here. We have another very special person here. John Dwyer and I are a matched set. Let me tell you why. We both cry when something means a lot. So if I get through this next part and then you get through your part, it's going to be something. Wanda Jackson is here. We, each week on our audio series called Oklahoma Gold, profile, actually it starts by me going, dignifying our history through the stories we share. John J. Dwyer, tell me a story. And then he goes, she was the queen of Rockabilly. And then he spends the next 15 minutes telling a story. It is one of the most compelling, wonderful things. If you remember being a child and riding in the car or listening to the radio or whatever, this is what Oklahoma Gold does, I think, for Oklahoma history. So years ago, after John wrote the Oklahomans Volume 1, I interviewed him on KTOK. And I asked him about his personal hero. And he started telling me this story about a woman named Kate Barnard. Now, I am from Ardmore. I have been an Oklahoman all of my life. And I had no idea who Kate Barnard was. There are a lot of other things I didn't know. I made an A in Oklahoma history. So how does one meet the other? Well, when they become real stories to you, then they become very special. And at the end of his interview about Kate Barnard, I said, I think I've sat next to her on a bench at the state capitol. First floor, there is a bench with a bronze Kate Barnard right there. And I had had my picture taken with her. I went back and had it taken again just 2 weeks ago, just because it meant so much more. That is how Oklahoma Gold got started. And tonight we are presenting the inaugural Oklahoma Gold Award. Now this award is given based on an incredible person, but also John J. Dwyer's telling of their story. And if you want to hear an incredible Oklahoma Gold, you can go to johnjdwyer.com under the podcast and hear the one about Wanda Jackson. But there is so much to know about Wanda Jackson that I invited Oklahoma County Commissioner and president of her fan club, Commissioner Brian Mon, because he knows everything. I think. Oh, she says not quite. Okay. About Wanda Jackson. And then I would like to present you with the award. So Brian Mon, Commissioner Mon, please come forward.
Well, first off, one of the great treasures in this building is Gwin, who has served on the same time slot.
Now you want the ugly cry, don't you?
Gwin has served on the same radio spot, on the same radio station for 38 years. And when Rush Limbaugh was given distinction, I think, of hitting the 33-year mark, there were lots of national stories about that might be a record. But Oklahoma's own Gwin Faulconer-Lippert would have far surpassed that, and she is a radio heroine in her own right, and she should be chronicled. So I got to meet Governor Keating when I was 17 and was early on, and he was a mentor to me. I got to meet Dr. Castor when I was 19, and he helped me with one of my first races when I didn't win, so you always remember those that helped you in the early days. And those were great mentors. But before them, I got to meet the Queen of Rock and Roll, Wanda Jackson, when I was 14, which allowed me to have a presence and awareness of her for the rest of my life. And as she said, there is a lot to know, and there's not very much time here to share it. But let me just put in a sequence, if I can, as best I can. So, Queen of Rock and Roll, because she started rock and roll. Not any small endeavor there, but I think she's often dismissed because she really helped start country music. As far as ladies were concerned, she was the first rock and roll artist, female, to have a hit, but she was, by most accounts, considered to be the 5th female to chart a country music hit, which means she's maybe three. It depends on if you count Patsy Montana and some of those from the Western, but she's right up there, 3. Let me just go ahead and elevate her up right here. But she has also defined sounds, and she is a stylist, and she included that with her mother designing her wardrobe, and CMT would call her the first sex symbol of country music. She went on and did what no one does. She left at the pinnacle of her career to follow her heart and her Christian testimony to go out and be a gospel singer. She charted over 50 singles on the Billboard charts. She has had over 60 albums, and including her latest, which was released last year, Encore, and it charted. And what that means is with her first chart in 1954 and then going all the way to 2021, ladies and gentlemen, right before you is the longest reigning charting artist in music history. She has worked with everybody, and recently she was named an Oklahoma Cultural Treasure. And so what that means is that you're entitled to have your portrait displayed in the state capitol, as Governor Keating mentioned, talking about the art. And soon there will be a painting of Wanda Jackson enshrined along with Wiley Post and Sequoia and Will Rogers and some of our other, standard bearers that are associated so with Oklahoma, and rightfully so. And it's already been determined that her portrait would hang near the governor's office because that is the most highly traveled tourist spot central in the entire Capitol complex, and they thought that one of Oklahoma's most famous people should be right there along with them. And so recently, to raise money for that, there were a number of Oklahoma Hall of Famers who came and joined in a salute to her. And what actually happened is we had to stop accepting names because eventually we had to go to press. And so many Oklahoma Hall of Famers who were in their own right as spectacular as you could ever imagine were in awe of her. And part of why they're in awe of her is because she's never left us. She stayed right here. And at probably tremendous sacrifice to her career. And so part of what they made so special in John's episode about what makes her Oklahoma gold is talking about that, because she appreciated Oklahoma's values and what Oklahoma had given to her and what she's been able to be as an ambassador to the world, reflecting our values and our heritage. And that was a decision that was jointly made by her and her husband, Wendell, who we miss so much. But that will lead up to about why this award is so significant. And I'll let Gwin take it from here.
Thank you. So we are presenting Wanda tonight her own autographed copy of the Oklahomans Two, yes, and even I think as special or more special. Sorry, John, more special is the inaugural Oklahoma Gold Award with Wanda and Wendell. Presented to Wanda Jackson, the Red River Institute of History presents the inaugural Oklahoma Gold Award to Wanda Jackson, Queen of Rockabilly, and this is the most important part. Oh, here we go. For being a remarkable Oklahoman and an exemplary person in every way, talent, character, musically, spiritually, and family. Would you like to hold the microphone? Yeah. Okay. Let me take this and hand it to you.
I'm sure all of y'all couldn't see the photo here, but it's close to the time my husband and I were married, 1961, a picture of Wendell and I. Thank you so much, Gwin.
President of your fan club knows you well. I said, she's won so many awards. What would make this one special that she would show to people? And he found this, and I need to say thank you to Mike Gannon and Rick Allen Lippert, because they are part of the production team tonight, but they are very much a part of Oklahoma Gold. So congratulations.
Well, thank you so much. This is quite an event, and I'm so glad I could be here. I'm like Dr. Castor. I'm at my age, I'm glad to be anywhere. So I enjoyed him so much. It's wonderful. And Brian, thank you for a wonderful introduction. I'd just about forgotten all those things. And maybe that's why I'm a little tired. Huh? I did retire a couple of years ago. And so now I'm experiencing the Oklahoma allergies. Everyone's told me how bad it is, and I thought they, I didn't think they was being truthful. But I'd never been here more than a week or two at a time. And so now I'm understanding it. And the wind out there, Bob, just about took me with it. I'm telling you, I was hanging on for dear life. And so Bob and I go back a long ways as far as his mother, Ida B., and I were acquaintances, and we worked together in television. And Bob Blackburn has just become a very special person to me in the last few years. So thank you for, you've had me here for so many things and events and, excuse me. And so I do appreciate it. And the award just reminded me that how happy I would be if Wendell could have been here. And the way Oklahoma has been honoring me lately, if he, he of all people was my biggest fan, actually. I don't know how I kept him as a fan after 55 years, but anyway, he was always promoting me, and he worked hard and got me noticed and inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2009. So he was here for a lot of things, but this would have been very, very special to him. So he couldn't be here, but I do have our family here. And I'm so happy to be doing some things where I get to see my kids more often. And today we only have 3. I only have 2 children, but now I have 3, I think. Right. So it's good to have Gina, my daughter, and Greg, my son, and his wife, Patty. Okay, stand up, kids. You're young. Hop up there. Thank you. They're my best accomplishments. So my thanks to Stella and to everyone responsible, and thank you for the book. I'm glad that Frank didn't get off with mine.
I know, yeah. And there's more. I'm sorry, I'm going to get all emotional. The Red River Institute is making a $500 donation to the Wanda Jackson Cultural Treasure portrait that will hang at the governor's office. Thank you so much. Let's hear it for the Queen of Rockabilly, Miss Wanda Jackson. I gave it to Brian. There's only one person that could follow this, and that is Dr. Bob Blackburn, who led the Historical Society, the Oklahoma Historical Society, for 41 years until he passed the reins early last year to Trait Thompson. And is Trait here this evening? Where are you, Trait? There you are. Hello, Trait. Thank you for coming. For more than half of that time, Dr. Blackburn served as OHS's executive director, and more than any other single person, He was responsible for the vision, planning, location, and design of the building we are in right now, the Oklahoma History Center, the finest state historical museum in America. Yes, and it's here in Oklahoma City. He has written over 20 books. In 2005, it was Dr. Blackburn's vision that inspired John to tackle a new kind of Oklahoma history book. For the past 17 years, he has assisted, encouraged, and mentored John in the writing of both Oklahomans 1 and Oklahomans 2. Now, supposedly retired, Dr. Blackburn is more sought after than ever to write, speak, and lead. He is here tonight with some special insight into these projects. So here is the man that John J. Dwyer considers Oklahoma's greatest historian, Dr. Bob Blackburn. You're welcome.
Well, what's happened so far brings back so many memories. Wanda performed right here on a stage when we had an exhibit on the history of rock and roll. And I remember your shimmy dress you had on that night. And she has been back and so generous with her time and her talents. And we've been good friends. And Frank Keating, we worked with him to get the funding for this building, the location. Frank wanted this place here for a very specific reason. And of course, this building is here because we, since 1893, have been collecting, preserving, and sharing Oklahoma history. And I had the good fortune to be editor of the Chronicles of Oklahoma for 10 years, met a lot of authors, kind of saw the direction of historiography, budding new historians, where the senior historians were, how they looked at our history. And so a lot of people have come to me over the years and said, I want to write a book. Very common. And typically, as a public servant, working for all of you, the citizens of Oklahoma, I would give my time. I say, yes, come on in, let's talk about it. Let me hear what you want to do. Normally, a person coming in wanted to write their own story about their life, their business, perhaps their community, perhaps their church. But typically, those topics were focused. Most of them were never written. But people had that desire to tell these stories. And then in 2005, the big, tall, rangy, I thought Texan at the time, walked in, and it was John. And he made an appointment, came in, we sat down and talked, and he gave me a book, a historical novel. And I have been a fan of historical novels over the years as a good way to teach and to learn about our history in that particular book. Wasn't that the Stan Wadey book? Stonewall, that's right. That came next. Stonewall Jackson, and of course one of my heroes, and I have books about him. But anyway, I read, took him seriously. I knew he was a good writer, journalistic training. His research was impeccable. But then what took me aback at first was his ambition to write a general history of the state of Oklahoma from beginning to end. How could he capture this story doing the covers of a book? I had spent years reading those books and writing my own books, and I knew that that was an ambitious goal. One, because of the challenges. And those challenges were many of writing a book like John has accomplished. One is that Oklahoma's story is so complex. I have titled a lot of what I do, Connecting the Dots of History, because our story is so complex. When you can tie two things together that seem incongruous, then people say, oh, really? Gwin mentioned that earlier, learning these facts and connecting and understanding. But it's so complex, it's hard to get your arms around it, to find a way to summarize it, to find that balance of economic history, social history, political history, and the history of the faith community. Few had accomplished that. So I was very aware of that. And I told him, I said, not many people have been able to take on this challenge and really be successful. And his first question was, well, Dr. Blackburn, are you going to write that history? I said, no, that's not the path that I'm taking right now. At the time, I was really wanting to do more on the history of free enterprise. That had been ignored by most academic historians up to that point. And I had some other projects, a lot of museum projects, and my duties here, of course. I said, no, I don't think that I have enough years to tackle that and to dedicate the focus that it's going to take to do it. And he says he wanted to try it. Well, I tried to be encouraging, knowing those challenges of the complexity, the diversity of our people. Oklahoma has no defining event that pulls our story together. We don't have an Alamo. We don't have a Santa Fe Trail. We don't have the French traders in St. Louis. We don't have that defining event. Two territories, settlement patterns going in all different directions, and the youth of the state. It's a complex story, and trying to find a way to tell it is a challenge. On top of that, for a professional historian, we either need a subsidy, a university to support our research and writing, or an institution, or organizations to support. And Oklahoma is a small community for historical work. Texas Historical Association is huge because of the number of Texans that want to read the books. In Oklahoma, much smaller market. OU Press over the years has done a wonderful job of tapping that market, but it's still trying to find a way to support an effort like writing a general history would be difficult. Then it came to the hard work of not just accepting a story that had been passed down, maybe through 2 or 3 generations of historians, and summarized each time with new errors creeping into the story, of going back to the original documents and looking for those stories and trying to find that balance, and then searching for the truth. That's hard work. Most people would ask me, oh, you must love writing these history books. I said, no, writing is really hard work. Many things we'd rather be doing generally than writing. It's hard work. And so not many people have been up to that challenge. And through Oklahoma history, we've had a few attempts that came close. Joseph Thoburn, who was the director at the Oklahoma Historical Society, Oklahoma's first archaeologist, wrote a multi-volume history of the state. But it was subsidized by a publishing house who then added volumes on biographies of individuals. And the subscriptions for those books to tell those biographies helped support the general work. And Joseph Thoburn was a student of the 19th century. Frederick Jackson Turner would have been more proud of his approach. The West has been settled by westward expansion, kind of a Eurocentric approach to our history. Did not capture the diversity really, but Joseph laid the foundations. Along would come a historian like Dr. Errol M. Gibson, who was one of my dear friends on the board of directors here when I started, and one of my mentors. He and I worked on several books together. Gib did a really good job with the early story, American Indians, which was his specialty. But then when he got to the 20th century, governor after governor, and what happened during those administrations. Kind of the easy way out. But it served for many years to inspire people to learn more about the history. Then along came David Baird and Danny Goebel, their collaboration. Again, a very small market. They wrote their book as a textbook. And textbooks are written towards teaching standards, so districts and teachers will select it and then buy multiple copies. Very limiting in some ways. Well, John's vision was to build something new on the shoulders of these pioneers, the people who had collected the stories, and find a new way to tell it. And we historians can really write 3 kinds of books if you have to summarize them. You can do a narrative book that tells a story. And that's generally what you get with most history. Someone's telling a story. It's a biography of a person or a story of a time or a tribe or something in the narrative story. It's the most common, and it sells well. People like narrative history. But then there's expository history where you're trying to prove a point. Here are the facts. Here are the conclusions, and here is why I think this happened like that. More narrow market, academia excels in that, trying to prove something new, open new doors of understanding for a limited market again. And then finally, descriptive history, of taking these facts and these stories and writing it in a lyrical way with all of the rhetorical devices that writers can pull from. That's the most difficult of all, descriptive lyrical writing. And when you can combine all three of telling narrative stories laced together into an expository way to say, here are the facts, here are my conclusions as a historian, and then describing it in such a way that people want to read it and are inspired. And those are the kind of books you go back to and reread and you underline, you say, I love the way that story was told. Well, John had those skills as a professional writer, a journalist, asking the right questions to get the right results, including the story of the faith community along with the economic and the political, the social histories, and finding a way to balance all of these parts of our diverse story into a book that is rare. There has never been a history of Oklahoma written like what John Dwyer has done. We thank him today for taking our story and bringing it up to the present time. In 100 years, there will be historians looking back on the Joseph Thoburns and the Errol Gibsons and the Danny Goebels and the John Dwyers. Those people who decided they would work hard and take 17 years to accomplish this, to ask the right questions, to find the right answers, and then to present us with the gift of a history that will be on the shelves of many fans of Oklahoma history forever. John, thank you for everything you've done and accomplished in this task.
Thank you, Dr. Blackburn. This place is just so incredible. Thank you. Our next speaker, before the man of the hour or the man in the cowboy hat speaks, oh, I saw another cowboy hat, but I mean this one. All right. Our next speaker, though, is Mart Green, Ministry Investment Officer of Oklahoma City-based Hobby Lobby, founded and built Mardel Christian and Education Supply into one of the most successful Christian gift store chains in the world. He later saved Oral Roberts University in Tulsa from financial ruin. His enormous participation in the YouVersion Bible mobile app fueled its development, spread, and historic 1/2 billion downloads worldwide. And on a personal note, if I may take one, my daughter had surgery. I was in a waiting room with twin 3-year-olds, and I was able to take out my phone and use the Bible app for children and keep them content for a very long time. Every day I use this app, and I thank you so much. His Every Tribe, Every Nation project is translating and digitizing the scriptures in all 6,000 known languages. John J. Dwyer believes that Mart Green grabbed the Oklahoman One's theme of our state as the land of hope for the second, third, and sometimes last chances, and incorporated that into his efforts to spiritually transform an entire city, Oklahoma City. He wrote the foreword to Oklahomans 2, and like others in tonight's speaker group, he figured significantly into the history this new book covers. A native Oklahoman, Mart and his wife, Diana, who is with us tonight, have 4 married children and 12 grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, Mart Green.
Well, it was a few years ago, in 2017, when I was trying to find what I call the spiritual seed of Oklahoma City. I've lived here 58 of my 60 years. I was born down in Lawton, but moved here, TGNY. Some of you are old enough to remember TGNY. I speak to the young crowds a lot, and they don't know what TGNY is. But this crowd, we got a TGNY crowd, I can see. So moved us here to Oklahoma City and got us involved in retail. But I was just trying to think, what's the spiritual beginnings? Beginnings are important. You always want to know. When I went to Oral Roberts University and they had a situation there, I wanted to know, why did Oral Roberts start this university? So I dug and dug and dug until I felt like I found it. So I started thinking about Oklahoma City, the city I live in. I started thinking, what's the spiritual seed? So I have no clue. I'm not a historian. I don't know. I've been here all my life, but I'm not. So I thought, well, I'm going to go check with Wes Lane. Many of you know Wes, and I think I saw Wes. I think he's here tonight from SALT. He said, Wes has been talking about Oklahoma City all his life. I'm going to go ask Wes. Wes, what is the spiritual seed of Oklahoma City? He gave a very deep answer. He says, Mart, I do not think cities have spiritual seeds. I said, Wes, you're not helping me. You know, you've been thinking about this city for a long time. Why did this city start? And all that stuff. He says, I don't know, but I had this friend, John Dwyer, who just wrote a book called The Oklahomans. So I said, all right. I went around the corner, Barnes & Noble. Matter of fact, there was a signed copy there, John. You had signed some copies and left them at Barnes & Noble. So I have a signed copy. I didn't get it from you personally, but a signed copy. So I got the book, and it's a 300-page history book. I had no interest in reading a 300-page history book, right? I just want the bottom line. I'm a business guy. Just tell me what it is. But I'd already bought the book, and so I thought, well, I guess I'll start. So I go to chapter 1, paragraph 1, and it says, before the Trail of Tears, before the war between the states, before the land runs and statehood and Dust Bowl, before world wars and oil booms and bust, and the Oklahoma City bombing and more tornadoes, there were others who came to present-day Oklahoma. It seems the Sooner State has always been the land of hope for the second or third or sometimes last chance people from other places. I'm done reading. That's all I need to know. Thank you, John, for not putting that on page 300. You put it on page 1. Took him 17 years in one paragraph. He saw that. But what in my spirit just leapt to think, yes, we are the place of hope. And then I started thinking more. I went to that same Oklahoma history class. I got an A, but I know more than I remember. That's what I say now. I know more than I remember. But I remember one thing. This city was started with a land run. There was hardly anybody here. And all of a sudden, these people came. And I started asking myself, who would come to a land run? Winners don't come to land runs. 40 of our 42 family members live here in Oklahoma City. We ain't moving, right? We're here. This is our home. People waiting for somebody else to do something for them don't go to land runs. You had to be an entrepreneurial spirit who needed a second, third, or maybe last chance. So I thought, if that's the way this city started, that's what we ought to go for, because that's where the fruit will come, is a city for second, third, and last chance people. And I'm one of those. We all are. Every one of us have had a time that we were second chance, third chance. But let's be the city of hope that does that. So it wasn't too long after that I pick up a book, because the word hope is in my brain right now. So anytime I see the word hope, I see it. There's a book called Hope Rising. It's written by Dr. Chan Hellman. He's an Oklahoman in Tulsa. There's only a couple of hope scientists. I didn't even know there were such thing as hope. Well, I guess because there's only 2 of them. Hope scientists that study hope. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to read this book because hope's on my mind. We're a city of hope. And he wrote, here's a couple of quotes that he wrote. Hope is not just an idea. Hope is not simply an emotion. It is far more than a feeling. It is not a wish or even an expectation. Hope is about goals, willpower, and pathways. A person with high hope has goals, the motivation to pursue them, and the determination to overcome obstacles and find pathways to achieve them. Hope is the perfect answer for imperfect people. He goes on to say, intentional strategies or interventions can move the needle on hope. In every published study on hope, every single one, hope is the single best indicator of well-being compared to any other measure of trauma recovery. Then another quote, once we have made the shift from what is wrong with you to what happened to you, we can begin the healing and move toward a pathway to hope. And so as I read that, there's many times I say, what's wrong with that person? Why are they doing that? What's wrong with you? What's wrong? No, what happened to you? What's your story? And that's what we're about here in Oklahoma. We're a place of hope. Austin wants weird. Let's take hope for Oklahoma. And so, and Oklahomans 2 picks right up with that spirit of being a place of hope for second, third, and sometimes last chance people. A couple of quotes from the book, like the hundreds of thousands of poor, suffering Oklahomans who stayed during the 1930s debacle of the Great Depression, Dust Bowl, and worn-out land. John writes, quote, "Like many other Oklahomans, panhandle farmer Caroline Henderson and her husband Will set their jaws like flint and stayed on their land and their case for over 60 years. Through the Dust Bowl's terrors tortured them, ruined them financially, and nearly killed them. Neither it nor anything else could drive them out. The Hendersons' marathon of mostly silent suffering stands in the 21st century as a lasting monument to the unshakable resolve of a people determined to forge a better life in the Oklahoma countryside that they may have had elsewhere." That's our relatives. This is what the people did who stayed here. They had hope, they had determination, and they felt they had a pathway. How about our Vietnamese Americans who fled the mass murdering North Vietnamese communist armies in the 1970s? John writes poignantly of how they suffered kidnapping into that army, imprisonment, torture, and separation from loved ones, as well as rape, robbery, terror, and murder on the high seas as boat people. Before many thousands of them blessedly found their way to faraway Oklahoma, quote from John, "Since then, they and their sons and daughters have risen to leadership roles in every facet of life across the state. They have restored and reinvigorated entire neighborhoods and sections of towns and cities. 12,000 Vietnamese comprised the vibrant Asian district in Oklahoma City alone at the beginning of 2010. Once again, the ancient scriptural admonition has bloomed to life in Oklahoma history. But as for you, what you meant for evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day to save many people." And so I'm also a beneficiary of the Vietnamese community. My daughter-in-law is Vietnamese. And so our state accepted them, brought them in, loved them, and accepted them not as refugees, not as immigrants, but as our new neighbors. And so that's the kind of city we want to be, a city of hope for second, third, and last chance, sometimes last chance people. So thank you, John, for inspiring us to know who we are, what we stand for. And so I honor you for Oklahomans too. Thank you.
My instructions from the author is, Gwin, everybody knows me. Don't worry about the introduction. I'm sure you know he has 4 Will Rogers medallions for literature and publishing. I'm sure you know he's very tall and wears a dark hat, which does not represent him at all because he is such an incredible soul, and he is one of the best storytellers I have ever read. And I look forward to every Sunday night at 7 on AM 1000 KTOK for Oklahoma Gold. Would you please welcome the man of the hour who has given more than 17 years of his life for us to be here tonight, John J. Dwyer.
Can I hold it? I'll just hold it. Thank you all. There's the man of the hour, my grandson Luke. So, wow, I don't have a prepared script. I usually depend on God to provide something at the hour. And he usually comes through, Wanda. I'm not sure about right now. The overriding sentiment, though, that comes right now is I'm amazed. I mean, I'm looking out at all these people that I admire and respect, and they're clapping for me. And, I'm the fortunate guy that got to write about what you all have done. I'm the tall, skinny, awkward, fatherless boy in Duncan. And if you could have ever told me in some of my unhappy, questioning years, 12, 13, 14, 15, and on, that this would happen, I might have believed in Jesus sooner than I did, Mo. Because that's a true miracle, a true miracle. You know, as I look back, the closest thing I ever had to a dad was Duncan, Oklahoma. And you know, you don't see it when you're there, right? Southside Oklahoma City, these other little towns and places, urban places where we grew up. But I look back now, and somehow a bunch of people took hold of me, and they overlooked my stupidities, my foolishness, my recklessness, my dangerous escapades, and they never gave up on me. And they somehow shooed me on out of there with a place to go and a plan and a hope. That was Duncan. And so I know the Andersons and some of the rest of y'all, you get to a point in your life and you realize you can write a book, you can rebuild Waukomis, Oklahoma, you can put domes on the Capitol like Governor Keating did, but nothing we can ever do can repay what this state did for us, what this people did for us. And I've never been more convinced of that than the last 2 years, as this country has about come apart at the seams, and I've watched communities in other states that have just lost their minds, lost their hope, people leaving them by the thousands, and I have never appreciated Oklahoma more than I have these last 2 years. Amen. So, I'm suspecting that maybe a little of the reason that Dr. Bob took a chance on me and kept letting me come back and take his time on appointments month after year after decade. Our first visit about this was in 2001. We were talking about doing a Stan Wadey novel for the Centennial event. And that didn't happen, but a lot more has happened since, hadn't it? So I'm suspecting that maybe a smidgen of the reason why he gave me a shot was because he knew that I would go in there and I wouldn't flinch from telling about our sorrows, sometimes our ugliness, our loss, our tragedies, but that I would find what I know Dr. Bob has always known, that there has never been a place or a time in Oklahoma history, no matter how dark it was, where there was not a hero that stood up and at least tried to do what was right and took a stand no matter how hard they got clobbered for doing it. And I'm 100 times more convinced of that truth now after spending 17 years on this, that whether it was during the oil boom and bust or during the burning of Greenwood or during the county commissioners or during, you pick the darkest part of our history, and that's part of what you're going to see in this book. And Mart, I got bad news for you, brother. I don't know how to break this to you, but this book is about twice as long as Volume 1. But my wife will be happy about this. She's always going, John, I'm a visual learner. I'm a visual learner. It has 800 illustrations, no kidding. So we show it. We don't just tell it. But I'm hoping that you're going to see that when there was no one around, some Oklahomans stepped up to do the right thing. And you think, well, why do we know about these people? Or I just thought that they were all crooks back during, this Supreme Court scandal or the county commissioner scandal or the governor scandal or the legislative scandal, just going, and you're going to find, I think, in this book, that some tenacious Oklahoman always dared to stick their head up in the line of fire and step up for what was right. And why do we not know about them? Well, it's because a lot of times they didn't win as men count winning. You follow what I'm saying here? They might not have been the one that got their picture on the dollar bill or their name on the calendar or the holiday. But as God counts men and women as heroes, we have had plenty of them. And Dr. Bob and Coach Stan White, I know you're watching this on the live stream. He couldn't be here tonight. Does anybody here know who Coach Stan White, Douglas Trojans, is? Hall of Fame high school coach. Stan White taught me more Oklahoma history than he's probably ever forgotten. And he'd have been here if he didn't have leukemia and pulmonary fibrosis right now. But God bless you, brother, because he'd be the first to say, yeah, a lot of the heroes, you don't know their names because they didn't win as men counted winning. But here we are, here I am learning as I tell their story. And when you read this book, you're going to go, my gosh, look at what that person did. I never heard him. I heard this crook, this rascal that got rich and famous, and everybody said was the man walking down the street. But there was someone else that I never heard of, and that's my job. And Dr. Bob, Dr. Castor, and some others, Steve Byas, taught me that, is you go dig it out and you find the truth. And no matter how long it takes, even if it's 17 years, right, Dr. Bob? That's how we know that our history, and this is my final point, and I'll close, but I do want to encourage you. We have other authors here tonight, several of them, Oklahoma authors back there. I hope some fine authors. I hope you'll look at their books and buy their books. Mike Clemmy, our greatest photographer in the history of this state, his works are back there. But our history is closer than we realize, my friends. It is all around us. And this is the message I have tonight, is to prove that to you. Because we have Dr. Bill Carmack over here. Now, Dr. Bill, have you ever been in a comprehensive Oklahoma history book before? No. Not really. And I'm not saying that to shame anyone else, but I'm saying that because when you think about, if you're even aware, that there was about a century from statehood to the late 1970s where our tribes were in the wilderness, literally and figuratively. And Lisa J. Billy, Chickasaw leader, taught me this years ago. So she was a terming out state legislative leader. And I said, well, what happened to the tribes after 1907? And I only wish I could remember her eloquent response, but it was eloquent enough where I never forgot it. And it set me on a detective hunt to find out what happened. And what I found out, among other things, was more than any one individual in America, Dr. Bill Carmack over here, University of Oklahoma Professor Emeritus, Regent Professor, went to Washington, D.C. with Senator Fred Harris and LaDonna Harris. And what they did was they figured out that our tribes, far from needing to be terminated, that was the term, they were getting ready to be officially written out of existence. You talk about a little early day case of cancellation, the cancel culture. Well, Dr. Carmack worked a lost art across party lines. He worked as a high official in the LBJ administration and the Nixon administration and their vice presidents. He wrote the Forgotten American speech, 1968. Look that one up if you're not familiar with it. And this man behind the scenes, once again, months, years, and even decades, we look now and wonder and marvel at the accomplishments of our tribes. Because when I was a kid, if you were part Native, you weren't proud of that. You wouldn't even tell anybody. You might get made fun of. You might get called a name. Now we're all on Ancestry looking up to see, do I have even 1% of a tribe, right? This man over here worked with Washington to get presidents to take actions, and Dr. Bob taught me a lot of this. What do we see now? That did not just happen out of the ether. Dr. Bill Carmack, you'll read his story. We talked about the Vietnamese. Amy Lee, I don't know where you are, I know you're here tonight. She's an award-winning back there. Amy Lee, God bless you. Yeah, her mom got her out of Vietnam because she didn't want to live under communism. I bet Oklahomans can appreciate that, right? And she paid a big price to do that. She didn't want to live under tyranny and atheism. So she brought Amy to America, and now Amy is in Oklahoma, the president of the Oklahoma City Writers Club, and just won a huge literary award for her 3-novel trilogy of Vietnamese history, of which the hero is modeled on her own mother. That's Amy Lee. Vietnam history is closer than we would realize. Or how about Dave Robinson, my handsome, I'm disgusted, he's my age and he looks like my son now. All that blonde hair. So Roby, all he did was take the gospel of Christ to countries that now are our allies against the Russians. Well, back then they were under the heel of the Russians, under the Russian boot, behind a place called the Iron Curtain. Roby had the audacity. We always would ask Doug Miller and some of my other fraternity brothers here, Rob Berry, what is Roby doing? Where is he? You know, he wouldn't tell us much. Well, he was in places like Hungary and Poland, these places where the Soviet Red Star was ruling by force of arms, torturing, murdering, killing, trying to get rid of God. And these guys had the audacity to take the gospel into those countries and lead a spiritual awakening in the country of Hungary that transformed that country to this day. So that now you have a strange phenomenon. The country of Hungary is sponsoring college scholarships to children from countries like Syria and others in the Middle East to come there and study, okay? Now, Dave, you've probably been in a lot of Oklahoma history books for doing that, right? No. So right here we have one of the leaders, because we think, well, the Berlin Wall fell, well, they just got tired of communism. People, the real story was they got the gospel told to them, and they realized there was a freedom they were never going to get with that dirty, filthy Red Star. And it started in Hungary. And when the Hungarians just en masse swarmed across East Germany, and they realized there's no border guards at the frontier anymore, we can leave. That's when the Berlin Wall came down, 1989. Okay? Margaret Taylor back here, Miss History Muskogee, has put together the Muskogee All-American History Facebook page, thousands of members. She and her husband have put together the Bass Reeves Walk in Muskogee. She taught me that Muskogee, alone among America, had 2 black business districts for decades while being oppressed and prejudiced against them and left out of things, not given opportunities. They did it the old-fashioned American way. They sucked it up and they did it themselves. They did it themselves with the help of God. And Margaret Taylor is building a base there in Muskogee of people learning not just about that, but the history of that entire part of the state. I mentioned Mo and Richard Anderson. It's kind of like almost, well, probably already everybody knows this, but no, probably not everybody knows it, Mo. Yeah, have you ever met a girl that was a daughter of a tenant farmer in Dust Bowl, Oklahoma, who literally went to school, grade school like my grandson's in now, wearing canvas and burlap feed sack dresses to school? And I guess it was fancy because you get different colors dyed probably, right? That would be the variety. And all she did was grow up to build the biggest real estate franchise company in world history. If you've ever heard of Keller Williams, Mo Anderson is the lady that went in there and built that. And we tell her story in the book too. And of course, like I said, Richard earlier, all he did was go into Waukomis. Waukomis is his Duncan, okay? He took Mo's vision that I'm going to put back in. No matter how much I put back in, it can never be as much as they put into me and what this great man of God turned out to be. There was someone else I was going to mention. Yes. We talked about the Vietnamese, and I'll close with this. And what I like to talk about, again, is those American heroes and Oklahoma heroes that typically get overlooked. Because there were some boys, in case y'all don't remember, that wanted to fight for the freedom of Amy Lee and her mom, right? And provided a way for them to escape when the country they were living in decided that it was going to pursue a different path than they wanted. People like Tom Hill, Don't know where Tom is, but I know he's here tonight. He flew 176 missions in the air, probably the most dangerous air war for Americans ever in American history. Then he came back and built a little company called Kimray for 50 years, wrote the Character First book. And back during the 80s, Kimray would help people out that got laid off. They would come up with ingenious ways to help people during that Great Depression, which, yeah, New York and California didn't say that, but here in Oklahoma, that was a depression we lived through in the early to mid-'80s. Took us till the mid-'90s to get out of it. So there was Tom Hill. There was a gentleman named Harvey Pratt. You're hiding out there, I know, somewhere, Harvey. So, yeah, Harvey, all he did as, what, a 19-year-old United States Marine, drop out of a helicopter with the communists firing machine guns at him, rappelled down and rescued American fighter pilots that were shot down in the jungles of Vietnam and take them back to safety. I said, well, gosh, Harvey, what'd you think about that? And I thought he was going to say something real eloquent. He goes, I knew I should have listened to him when they told me, don't ever volunteer for anything in the Marines. Well, of course, some of y'all know he went on to be probably America's greatest forensics artist. He could figure out what a criminal looked like 30 or 40 years later or 30 or 40 years before to help track down the bad guys. And speaking of bad guys, he tracked down, by doing detective work all over the Cookson Hills in eastern Oklahoma, tracked down, captured that rotten Girl Scout murderer that some of us remember from the late 1970s. And then recently in his retirement age, he just had a little hobby where he designed the winning entry in the Native American Veterans Memorial that will be the last monument put on the mall in Washington, D.C. So Harvey, where are you? God bless you, brother. And his kids went to the same school my daughter did, Christian Heritage Academy. Okay, so that's all I have. I just want to say thank you for allowing me to be the scribe that gets to tell the story about all the sacrifice, the tears, the coming back, the second, the third, and sometimes the last chance that has made this state the only place I ever want to live again. Thank you, and God bless y'all. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Here's the preview video for Oklahomans 2, narrated by Wade Burleson.
November the 16th, 2016. Oklahomans met an Oklahoma history book like none before. Now, the long-awaited sequel of post-statehood Oklahoma. Hard and lovely. Violent and tender. Land of the second, third, sometimes last chance. Feel the scalding flames of Greenwood. Choke on the Dust Bowl. Liberate Dachau with the Thunderbirds. Order a Coke from a lunch counter that won't serve you. Brave the Pacific in search of freedom. Feel the world shake as the Murrow Building collapses on you. Shield your students with your body as an F5 blows down your school on you and them. Love and defend your state and country as others hate and seek to destroy them both.
All right, let's party, y'all. This is my family, my wife, my daughter, and my grandson. Luke Jackson Dwyer, part Choctaw, I'm proud to say. Love you, buddy. All right, y'all. Oh.
Here, we got to put this up here.
I missed this conversation.